So we're going to do a little exercise here to see how we can use reporting parameters with curtain panels. Now I'm going to make a new curtain panel pattern based. And one of the things that people have had problems with these is that unlike regular curtain panels, they don't schedule their lengths very well, partly because if you have a curtain panel that's, say, a hexagon, the old curtain panel, sort of guaranteed length and width doesn't really make sense when you're in something like this. So it isn't something that's sort of a guaranteed parameter. So I'm going to go back to a regular rectangle. I'm going to show you how to use reporting parameters to actually make schedulable lengths and widths of these sorts of panels. So the first thing that you need to do is understand where you're going to be putting your dimension. You want a dimension, say, from this point to this point, but that's going to be a different kind of length depending on how it deforms. If you have a point like that, and you have done a dimension from here to, let's say that I'm on level 1, or that I'm on that level even, and I do a dimension from here to here, it's telling me 10 feet, but, if you look at it this way, you know that that's much more than 10 feet. So what I want to do is I actually want to dimension along this green line, along the reference line, sort of as an absolute distance between this point and this point. So how do you do that? Well, make your measure tool active, and then you set the work plane, and you're going to set it on the work plane of that line. So now, and I'm going to make sure that I'm going to hit the adaptive point. You see right here, it's going to say adaptive point in your status bar. Adaptive point is the name for these particular kinds of points that we have in curtain panels and adaptive components. And I want to make sure that I get those because I get a very strong reporting parameter that way. So I go click, and there I've got my dimension. You see it's not 10 feet, it's 14 feet because we're going out of plane. So there, you see it's 10 feet, and it moves up. Well, I'm going to select it now, and I'm going to add a parameter, and I'm going to make an instance parameter, and it's going to be a reporting parameter. Now this is just going to be a parameter that tells Revit what it is. It's going to sort of rock and roll with whatever changes happen at the instance. I'm also going to make it a shared parameter so that I can have it show up in schedules. So we're going to go in, and I've already added a shared parameter called length1, and I'm just going to assign that one to it. And so now I've got a shared parameter called length1 that is assigned to this piece. Now, the cool thing about the particular way that I've set this up is that if I dimension between what's called host geometry, this is a sort of a tricky definition, but basically any elements that are baked into your template, like these points, if I dimension to them and I make a reporting parameter from it, I can also use this to drive formulas. So for instance, I could select this thing, I could create a form from it, and now I can have that form driven by the reporting parameter. So say I'm going to make my positive offset, I'm going to add a parameter that's called height. I'm going to make it an instance property. And I'm going to have my height driven by the length. So I'm going to say that's equal to length 1. Boop. So you see that this thing has just reacted to what this is. Now if I change this, you can see that it actually got longer. So if I go back in here and I check, oops, wrong one. Now they're both 15 feet. So what's happening with this now is that not only is this thing going to be giving me those nice numbers that sort of guaranteed parameters or parameters that were inside of the old curtain panel would give me, but it's also driving the geometry on this. So I'm going to load this into, well, let me give myself a mass family. let's say new conceptual mass, make a new mass, and I'll give myself a little piece of geometry here. This is my sort of default shape I make for this sort of stuff, is this sort of thing, which has non-straight lines. I'm going to divide it, and I'll just give myself a break on regeneration and just make it a little bit easier, just 6 by 6. So I'm going to load this into it, and I'm going to set up my panel, family 2. It's going to look a little funny because it's kind of chunky, but and now I'm not exactly sure which direction my length parameter is on, but let's just go with this for a minute. We're going to put this into a project environment. Load into the project environment. Now, because my panel is a shared family, it's going to show up in the project not as a mass. It's nested into a mass, but it'll show up and have visibility settings that go along with curtain panels. So, for instance, if I go in here and I just isolate that category, isolate element, there's my curtain panel. If I go and isolate the category, we see that I've got all of my pieces here still. So if I go in and I get my shared parameters, it's already set up. I've got length, I've got my parameter group panels. I'm going to make a new schedule. Schedule quantities. I'm going to do curtain panels. And let's see here. There's my length 1. I'm going to add that. And so now I can see all of the different lengths that one length showed up as. So if I go back here, and actually let's sort that for a second so we can see them all lined up. So you can see I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 panels that are all exactly the same length here. And that's because, if you look in here, that means that it's probably, that length is right here along this edge, because this one and this one and this one and this one and this one will all have the same length, and they come in groups of 6. So we're back at my curtain panel. You can see that this is that guy. I can go and I can add another length, and it will schedule the same way. And not only that, but I also know that it's driving my geometry. So I'll be able to know, that the height of this panel, for instance, is also going to be 10 foot 6 inches because it's driven by my length parameter. Anyway, that is a quick and dirty introduction to using reporting parameters with curtain panels to basically, in some ways, do a little catch-up with what old curtain panels could do, but also starts to show you some of the flexibility of adding reporting parameters to other uses. And I hope that was useful.